Hello and thanks once again for taking the time to download and listen to this podcast from CelticUnderground.net, the world's longest running football fans podcast, now entering our 11th season. But before we can start that season on Saturday against Hearts, we have to do one more thing. We have to tell you who you voted for as the Celtic Underground top 10 players of season 2015-16.
You give me my own bed. 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 You give me my.
The new music is playing in the background as usual, and if you want your music to come along, it's podcasts at CelticUnderground.net. This new music, fitting for the top 10. It's as if we deliberately know how to pull this podcast together. It's from an Oslo-based band. Yes, in the season of the final season of Ronnie Deila, our Norwegian-based manager, well, he now is, we have an Oslo-based band. It's Misha Non-Penguin who got their tunes in. You can hear them in the background here. More on at the end. Links on the website. Anyway, get your new music to podcasts at CelticUnderground.net. It's a busy time at Celtic. Hopefully we're bringing in a couple of players. Hopefully we're clearing out some players. And we discuss some of those players that might be getting cleared out on this very podcast. As you know, every year we have our vote for who the Celtic Underground top 10 players will be and the number one player. This season we opened up the voting even further to listeners of the podcast, and you sent your votes in. Some were only for Griffiths, some were only for Tierney, some were only for Griffiths and Tierney, and some were for a few more. You'll get to hear who they were. Anyway, it's a busy time coming up. We've got the Hearts game Saturday, Motherwell game Wednesday. By the time you're listening to this, you'll know who Scotland's only representative in Europe, again, are playing in our final qualifying game for the Champions League. We've got a friendly a week on Saturday before those ties happen. Anyway, enough of me. I was joined for this podcast by Lachie Moore, Jack Lyon and Mark Cooper to discuss your votes and our votes for the Celtic Underground top 10 players of the year. Sit back, listen, enjoy and see if your pick matched the wisdom of the crowds. This is me, Harry Brady, passing over to these guys. So I'm now joined by an esteemed panel. I did tweet yesterday it was going to be a panel of 6, but I think last season actually Lachie was supposed to be on the panel for the Player of the Year and ended up a poor Wi-Fi signal resulted in Lachie not being on. So he has joined the panel this year. Mark Cooper is with us, Jack Lyons is with us, who's been the last couple of podcasts, and sick notes have come in from St Anthony and Hullboy. And a plain note has come in from Lawrence Donegan. So we asked people to vote in for the Celtic Underground top 10 players of last season, and we had quite a number of votes. 4 or 5 people only voted for no more than 3 players because they said the rest were so bad that there was no point in voting. So we will start, and the guys are going to tell us what was so fantastic about each of these players last season. So, in reverse order of best competitions, in 10th place, 9th place and 8th place respectively were Stefan Johansson, Nir Beaton and Lustig. So, starting off, age before beauty, Lachie. Johansson, Beaton, Lustig, what was your thoughts on those 3 last season?
Well, I think anybody who had seen them the previous season would have been astonished to think that they would come in the last 3 of any top 10. Because the Player of the Year was clearly Johansson the year before in Scotland, and Beaton looked in his first season with Ronnie as if he could be a real mainstay of the midfield. Lustig, I was always suspicious of Lustig's fitness. and he missed more games than he played, so I could understand why he was poorly placed, but the other two just had very poor form. And I think you suggested to me in a previous podcast that we were Virgil's best pals, and when Virgil left, we down tools.
Yeah, well, that's a point, Mark. Lustig and Beaton, not Lustig, Johansson and Beaton were best pals with Virgil van Dijk, who went from £8,000 a week at Celtic to £40,000 a week at Southampton.
And then 80, you said the other.
And now he's on 80. So, what's your thoughts on those three? Interestingly, Johansson won our Player of the Year the season before. Beaton came mid-table in 6th place, and Lustig, because the previous season he was made of glass, Lustig didn't feature.
Yeah. Well, usually when I'm doing this Player of the Year thing and kind of evaluating a player's performance over a season, I usually put a lot more emphasis on the most important games. So, playing against Rangers, all the big European games, and the game out in Malmo, our biggest game of the season, Johansson and Beaton disappeared. It was their most important game. It looked at the end of the game with about 20 minutes to go that Beaton was possibly trying to get himself sent off.
Yeah.
Probably should have got sent off. He was already booked, I think, and he gave away another 2 fouls, and he looked pretty petulant. Johansson really didn't have a good game out in Malmo, and I don't think. And after that, then it's hard to. They didn't have great seasons in the league anyway, but for some of the most talented players in our squad, just to not show up in the most important games, for me that was the reason why I had them so low. I think I had them at 9 and 10 possibly. Lustig, as looking back on Lustig's contribution over a season, and he was actually, I think I had him at around 5th or 6th or something. He apparently had 8 assists, the highest in the squad, and he also had 4 goals, which from right back position, and a right back that doesn't go as high up the pitch as Izagirre's been doing is a pretty good contribution for a team. So I'm maybe a little bit surprised that Lustig is so far down, to be honest.
What about you, Jack?
I think when you look at those guys, particularly Johansson and Beaton, the biggest disappointment, and they came in for a lot of criticism, those two guys, it was just as a comparison to what we'd seen, particularly in the second half of Ronnie Deila's first season. Those two guys were really excellent when Johansson moved up, and then Beaton came into the team alongside Brown, and those two guys were a standout. Beaton just looked so excellent. I remember Inter Milan, he just looked so confident on the ball. He was just so good, and Johansson added so much, quite an unusual role, high up, pressing and all that. And it was the disappointment of why are these guys not as good as they were last year. I think Johansson in particular took a bit too much criticism over last season.
Do you not think? Because I agree with you about Johansson's criticism. Do you not think it became one of those things of? And I even saw it last night, and I know we're talking about last season. Last night, Johansson played an exquisite through ball to Griffiths through the eye of a needle that Griffiths latched on to, possibly could have scored, should have scored. And 10 minutes later, Johansson had a misplaced pass, and all the people round about me were having a go at him, saying, useless, shouldn't be in the team, you've not been able to find another Celtic player with a pass for months. And I thought, if by months you mean somewhere in the region of 180 to 200 seconds, then you might be right.
Absolutely. It's something I think we mentioned when I was on the podcast with you last time, which is the whole thing about people just wanting to keep up with whatever their opinion is, and how they just tend to blank out the information that doesn't go along with their current opinion. So I think like that point that you made there is a prime example of that. And I think a lot of it came down to when people started to get really, tired of Deila, was Johansson's his pet, and that was, it was like attached to Deila, so any criticism that came with Deila kind of got onto Johansson second hand.
Do you know, I think as well, Lackey, that Mark made a good point there about Lustig didn't feature in our top 10 the year before because he was made of glass and never played, and your point about his injuries, yet actually one of the biggest challenges I felt in making my top 10 was there was very few players who actually strung more than 5 or 6 games together before seeming to be out for a month with an injury. And Lustig, relative to his previous season, actually was pretty consistent and played most games.
I agree relative to his previous season, but he seemed to be injured all the time. But I thought when he came at first, he was a much more aggressive player in terms of going forward. He was. I remember some of the European ties where he was overlapping and putting some tremendous crosses. I remember a goal that Hooper scored when he was there. But last season, and well, we haven't seen much this season, I detected an unwillingness to go beyond. If they played the ball inside, he seemed unwilling to go on and make the run up the right wing in the way that Tierney is more willing to do on the left, compared to what he'd been like before. So, I remember the goals that Mark was talking about, and I know that overall he did contribute a number of assists, but I was thinking more in comparison when he came at first, when he looked like a really aggressive attacking fullback. It struck me that he lacked a bit of confidence last season, and it was frustrating. It frustrated me a lot to see him continually coming inside and playing the ball square or back along the line.
You want to make a point, Mark?
No, well, I was just going to make the point that he actually played, out of all the squad, he played the 4th amount of minutes out of the whole squad. Which, considering his reputation, and everyone basically accepts his reputation because it's true that he's missed a lot of minutes over the course of his career. But to be 4th, and actually, Beaton was 3rd. So
wow, I would really surprised that Beaton was the 3rd minutes.
Yeah.
I think, though, he suffers from that modern player's tendency that if there's the slightest niggle, he goes off.
Uh-huh.
And that still doesn't rhyme well with the Scottish mentality of playing through the pain barrier. Now, it's the intelligent thing to do as a modern footballer, but they'll harken back, a lot of the crowd will harken back to that old model of, get your sleeves up and get on with it. There was even a sense last night when Patrick Roberts went down that he went off a quick, but everybody knows he would just make that thing worse by staying on. People, especially the older generation, have memories of guys who apparently played on crutches. But they didn't really. They see this modern, sophisticated footballer who goes off if somebody looks at him sideways.
But then these are the guys who unfortunately now genuinely are on crutches permanently in their life. Yes. I was at Capello the other night to see the youth team, and I was sitting in front of John Fallon of former podcast fame. Uh-huh.
And he was having a wee rant about the left back, who was Tierney. He wasn't talking about the youth player. He was talking about the previous game against Barcelona, perhaps it was the last time he'd seen him, and how after 20 minutes the boy had stopped and sort of was taking a breath, and he was comparing that to his days when Steen would have had them out of the place if they'd looked tired and they did an and I thought that attitude just sums up so many of the support.
Jag, you want to make a point about Lustig?
Yeah, I thought what Wacky said about how Lustig seemed to be playing a much more conservative role, rather than getting up the touchline all the time, maybe just sitting deeper or coming inside, playing a simple pass, might have been a factor in why he managed to play so many games, because he was playing a less demanding role. Instead of getting up and down the whole game, he was sitting deeper, and so his muscles were getting put under less pressure in every game, and maybe that's why he was fit as much as he was.
Yeah, and I suppose if you think about it, we sold Matthews, sent Fisher out on loan, and then Janko broke his leg or did ligaments, whatever it was, that had him out for 3/4 of the season. So we actually had no alternative to play instead of Lustig anyway. You know, on the couple of occasions where he didn't, I think Effie played right back.
Effie's actually a good right back.
I remember Effie coming on as right back when we beat Barcelona at home. It's a strange substitution because I can't remember who had to come off. Lustig had to come off, of course he did. And Effie was already playing at centre back, and instead of just putting on, say, I think Matthews was at left back, yep. And instead of putting Matthews to right back and putting maybe Mulgrew back to left back, he put Ambrose out from centre back out to the right, and it seemed to be that Lennon was most concerned about the problems on the wing and the quickness of the feet of the wide forwards for Barcelona, and that he thought that Ambrose and Matthews were going to be much more adept at defending that than Mulgrew would be, for instance.
I think as well that night Matthews handled, I think it was Pedro that played on the right that night. Matthews had him in his back pocket. Matthews was happy to come out wide or inside, wherever Pedro was, because he had him for pace. And like you say, Ambrose and Lustig played the role that night, or they were almost a centre-back, because it was Sanchez and he just played quite narrow. But yeah, I remember Ambrose playing right back that night, and he was good. But then again, he was always good that season, apart from one game.
Just one thing back to Lackymore about the game, the development squad game. Sorry, I'm digressing here from a general conversation, but what did you think of Nesbitt?
Well, he was terrific. I saw him 2 weeks ago at Dalbeattie, against Dalbeattie Star, and that's the first time I'd seen him, and I was really impressed by him. He came on at half-time that night. He played the whole game the other night. I thought he was brilliant. And I thought the interesting thing about him was how quickly he could turn and face his opponent. He often got the ball way back to the goal, and he was able to take it and turn and then take the man on. And there aren't many of them can do that. Too many can just lay the ball back off.
I tell you another thing, just while we're talking about the development squad. 18 months ago, when I'd heard a few people talking about Tierney, Ronnie Deila said, I was at a fans forum thing, and Ronnie Deila was asked what he thought of the youth setup, and he wasn't fulsome in his praise, but he did say, but Kieran Tierney can be as good as he wants to be. And then I have heard in the last 10 days that in the youth setup, Brendan Rodgers most rates Ralston the right back. And interestingly, I'd heard from people, because he was at Queen's Park last season, and Queen's Park thought he was too good for them and was already on the verge of being good enough for Celtic first team. That was the Queen's Park coaching people. So we seem to be able to produce full-backs at the moment.
That's what made the superb element.
So anyway, so that's Lustig, Beaton, Johansson. They were in 8th, 9th and 10th place. Then the next three, I find these the next three I find quite interesting for a variety of reasons. In 7th place was Gordon, in 6th place was McGregor, and in 5th place was Roberts. So Jack, do you want to lead us off on your thoughts on those three?
I think when you say that those are interesting picks, I think the key factor in that is that for Roberts and McGregor, their contributions were perhaps good, but not great in number. You know, those guys, Mark was saying there about how the minutes that Lustig and Beaton had played, I don't imagine Roberts and McGregor played a very big number of minutes at all. I remember when Roberts came in and...
Well, the thing that gets me about Roberts was the people who voted, if they voted for Roberts at all, he was in the top 4. So people either didn't vote for him or voted for him in the top 4. And I would put that down to, personally, I would say Roberts played outstanding in 4 games. Because he must have only played about 10 games in total. And we've picked a player, or the people who voted have picked a player in 5th place who played only about 10 games. I think that says more about the whole team last season than how good Roberts was in the 4 games that he played well in the 10 games.
Oh, sorry, Jack.
No, on you go.
I've been more impressed with Roberts in pre-season now than I was when he came from January onwards. Because, as you say, I'm looking here, he played 11 games, and for about a month or so, there was a thing about why isn't Deila playing Roberts?
Yep.
So he only probably started playing right at the end of February or sometime in March, really, when he started to get proper minutes. And as you say, he had about 3-4 very good games. Didn't have an especially good game against Rangers.
No, my recollection, and others listening might be correct, my recollection was he played maybe 1.5 good games just before the Rangers game, so that Celtic fans were suddenly saying he'll tear Rangers apart on the big open spaces of Hampden. He had only played 1.5 good games for us at that point. And then, as you say, Mark, wasn't at the races that day.
I think he had played some really, really good games for the development squad that were televised, scored some brilliant goals. So when he did come into the team, people had high hopes because of his reputation and what they'd seen. And as you say, he played bits of games well. I didn't see that particular game you're talking about because I was away playing golf that day, deliberately. But I thought towards the end of the game he had some nice games. But he's a winger, and as wingers, they flit in and out of the game, they don't dominate the game. So unless they do something particularly brilliant, you can actually miss their contribution. But he did some brilliant things, scored some nice goals. But I think it's good with a breath of fresh air.
And Mark, McGregor coming in at 6th.
Mm-hmm.
What's your thoughts on that?
I think I quite like when a player maximises his talent, and it's going to sound like false praise or faint praise or whatever, but I think physically, I don't think he'll be able to get around the park as well as other players. But he has, for instance, I think the season before, he maybe scored 4 European away goals.
Mm-hmm. He was our top scorer in Europe, I think, the season before.
Yeah. And if I'm talking about, a player, you want a player to contribute in the big games. Well, to be fair, McGregor has been contributing in the big games. There's obviously Legia and Maribor. There's a game in Iceland as well when he scored away. Mm-hmm. Then there's a game, I think, at home to Ajax last season when I think he scored again.
Mm-hmm. So
for a player that I think, for instance, Tom Roderick is a much more talented boy, but McGregor's really maximising his talent, and you have to respect it. If we buy a player like Stuart Armstrong for 1.5 million, and now our own boy is, I think people would be divided in who they think is better, Armstrong or McGregor, but it'd be quite they're almost at the same level, and that's someone we brought through ourselves. So I think he's got to a fairly good level. And I also think that it's kind of it says that possibly we shouldn't be buying so many players when, for instance, the boy O'Connell's development will be stifled, in my view, if we got that boy Paddy McNair.
Yep.
You're already saying what you're saying to Jack last week, that we have something like 7 players who can play at centre back.
Mm-hmm.
If we bring in McNair as well, to me it's almost like bringing in Blackett last season.
Yeah, what's the point?
Unnecessary. Yeah. Anyway, every time I talk, I'm digressing from my main points.
No, but the thing about McGregor for me that's really interesting is up until halfway through last season, there was almost audible groans in the Celtic support if he was either named in the starting 11 or came on as a sub, particularly playing out wide. I felt, particularly from about February onwards, when Ronnie Deila was playing, Mackay-Steven, McGregor, and one or two, I can't remember, there was somebody else who, for a period, people were saying, I don't know why he's picking him. Well, I did see why. Getting back to your point about McGregor scoring some important goals, if we play 4-2-3-1, I just felt he was trying to find some people who played in the middle of the park or somewhere behind the one striker who scored goals. And Mackay-Steven and McGregor scored goals. And for me, McGregor, the sort of, again, getting back to your backhanded compliment, there was an element of, I remember round about March, starting to say to the guy next to me who had been a real critic of McGregor's, that the biggest thing you can say about McGregor is you've stopped, you no longer complain about him. And it wasn't that he was doing a great job, he was just no longer doing the things that were annoying people like the guy who sits next to me who criticised him all the time.
Like we talked about it before in the podcast about that, the reason why I played McGregor and Mackay-Steven was because they did actually contribute goals.
Yeah.
I said to you before that, to my mind, McGregor's a midfield player, and for a lot of the games when he was struggling, he was being played wide. He's not a winger. I think he's a good central midfield player. Although last night I thought his performance was quite disappointing, considering the standard he had been setting. Because I thought he was really, look as though he was developing into a very decent player. But I thought last night he struggled.
Yeah,
I would have had him in the top 10.
So I was surprised and pleasantly pleased, because one of the things that I think is very contradictory about the Celtic support, they will talk about wanting youngsters to come through and our own to come through, and getting back to your point, Mark, about O'Connell, but they will be very critical of us not going and signing people. And as you know, one of my mates always Neil McCallum on our site always talks to me about, we signed Chaduri. Was he dramatically better than Paul Caddis at the time? Or would we have been better? Would we have been better persevering with Paul Caddis?
Well, I said to you recently, I think, on Twitter about this imperative of the transfer window. People now are tuned into the idea that there is a transfer window, you must buy players. Whereas I would much rather look at what they have and say, let's give these boys a chance. Now, we know they might not play 52 games a season, but they might play a dozen games and then go back to the youth team and then come in again. But you have to play them. And I think Mark's right about O'Connell, because we talked about O'Connell in the last time we were on the podcast, and I said that I remember him playing some decent games before he was sent out on loan. And you think, why are they sending him out on loan? Now, perhaps because they had Virgil and people like that, there was no place for him. But when you're struggling, he's a better bet than many, because he's a good player.
So the other thing about those three, we've got Roberts, McGregor, Gordon in 7th place. Gordon, who was in joint 2nd place last season. Jack, what's your thoughts on Craig Gordon?
I think a lot of what is to be said about Gordon is exactly the same thing that I said about Johansson and Beaton. Was just the main issue people had was the drop-off. I remember at the time when he just came in at first, and obviously we just lost Foster, and he'd been really excellent. One game in particular, I remember away to Salzburg, he was just outstanding. We got a draw that night and he was why. And people were saying, oh no, he's better than Foster. And as much as I never went to that extreme, he had been excellent, and then all of a sudden last season we just started to see more mistakes, and there was the one in against Milan, or the two in the one game in the season before, but apart from that it seemed like a blip. But we started to see more and more just smaller things, flapping at crosses that maybe could have you would want the keeper to come and collect, things like that. Yeah, again, and something else I thought was, and Deila clearly wanted it, and Rodgers wants the same thing, and this is more of a general point, but Craig Gordon can't pass the ball.
Yes.
At all. Even his long kicks aren't particularly good.
He's dreadful at passing.
And going forwards, I remember when Rodgers was announced, and the first person that came to mind that I thought he'll sign was Vorm, because I remember when Swansea got promoted and he talked about Vorm, and he said, we've brought this guy in from Holland, and he said he's a good goalkeeper, but it's massively important to my style of play that the goalkeeper is good with the ball at his feet, and that's just something Gordon doesn't have.
It's interesting that the point you made there about in his first season with Virgil van Dijk, but he was still playing fantastically. For me, his problem is his decision making, trying to judge when to leave the line and when not to leave the line, and it's almost as if once he's decided he's leaving his line, he goes for it regardless of whether the split second after he's decided to leave the line he shouldn't have. And I do wonder whether in his first season with such a commanding centre half in front of him in Virgil, he's a great shot stopper, and if we think about the times that he mucked up at Hearts, it was coming off his line for crosses. I can remember him dropping the ball into the back of the net, and I wonder whether commanding centre half Virgil van Dijk means that he can just stay as a 6-yard box goalkeeper and be a great shot stopper, and in the last season, to compensate for the lack of authority from his centre halves, he's felt more obligated to come off his line, and that's where he starts to make mistakes. Mark, what are your thoughts on him?
As you said before, it's a long-standing thing. Like, he used to do it at Hearts. I remember watching, I think Scotland were away in Lithuania, and I was in a pub watching a game. And I had a pretty high opinion of Gordon at the time. I thought he was clearly the best Scottish goalkeeper. And there was a Hearts fan in the pub who every time Lithuania got a cross in or got a corner, he would just be screaming like, get off the line, and then he'd be turning around to anyone who'd listen and say he never comes off his line. Now that's about 10-12 years ago. This is when Gordon's just coming out.
Yep.
And you can see it's still the case.
And I always felt Andy Gorham never came off his line. Andy Goram's defence knew Andy Goram would never come off his line. For me, the problem is if the defence thinks sometimes he will come and sometimes he won't, that's when the bigger problem arises.
Yeah.
Lackey, your thoughts on Gordon?
Well, I suggested to you some time ago that I thought perhaps we were looking at a goalkeeper who'd had a very bad injury and was concerned he might get another one. His shot stopping, where it was, he just has to react, was brilliant, but it was almost as if when he had time to think about it, he wasn't too committed. And I mean, there was the one last night that was disallowed where they did that stupid star jump thing. I remember that was almost the same as the goal that Ajax scored at Celtic Park last year, where he's jumping up, spreading his arms, and you see, just come and take the damn cross. But I don't think he wants to do it, and I may be wrong, it may not enter his mind. I just had the impression he was very conscious that he could get hurt. Whereas the likes of Peter Schmeichel, I know he's no Peter Schmeichel, but who was on great German goalkeeper, Oliver Kahn, he would bully everybody come into that box. He'd just go through them, knowing he would get away with it. But Gordon doesn't seem to want to be that dominant goalkeeper.
I mean, that was... this is not a last season comment, this is this season, but that was my point about Astana. Whilst O'Connell was clearly at fault for the Astana away goal, for me, once a goalkeeper decides to come off his line, he takes everything. Mm-hmm. And Gordon came off his line and then flapped at that. But anyway, the interesting things for me were Gordon's drop from 2nd to 7th. McGregor, everybody who voted for McGregor if they voted at all for McGregor, they voted him as our 5th, 6th or 7th best player. He was never in people's bottom 10. He was never 9th or 10th, and he was never 1 or 2. So obviously everybody has an opinion that he's doing all right, is probably the best way to put it. And Roberts, again, getting on to the comment of maximum 4 or 5 games got him into 5th place.
Just one last thing before you move. Just one last thing about Gordon is that in my lifetime, apart from the last 2 main keepers we've had, Boric and Foster, despite everything we've said, Gordon's still probably the best keeper we've had in my lifetime, or at least since I've been watching Celtic, regularly since maybe like 1990 onwards. We haven't had a better keeper.
No, maybe that's a problem for me, because since I've been watching Celtic regularly, we've had Boric and Foster.
Oh, you see, will be a problem for you, Jack, because and Lackey's even older, because Peter Lashwood was all right, but was not great at crosses. Packy Bonner's a strange one, because you thought he was all right at the time, and you now look back to every single set of games that you see old highlights of where Celtic lose goals in. And every single one of them, virtually every single goal you ever see Celtic lose in the Packy Bonner era, whilst he might not have been directly at fault, you are looking at it thinking, what were you doing, Bonner? Virtually every one of them. Anything with a cross in particular. And then after Bonner... Sorry?
He was another great shot stopper. He was hopeless with the cross ball.
Yeah,
and he was hopeless with the ball at his feet.
He would come a lot for cross balls and completely flap and be nowhere near it.
It was clear that he'd never played soccer as a child, because he just didn't know what to do with a ball at his feet.
And immediately after here's one for you, Jack. Immediately after the pass-back rule, there were lots of goalkeepers who obviously had gone through their whole life never having to play football with their feet, and that was a bit of a transformation. I would say Boric would be the first goalkeeper we had who'd been of a generation where he'd only known the non-pass-back rule. Anyway, that's on to them.
But just to close, what Mark was saying about what he said about his inability to pass the ball, because you talked about people getting frustrated last night about the business of being patient when they're passing the ball about. That in itself, sometimes I think there are unnecessary passes made. But when they kept putting it back to the goalkeeper and he would play it long, I said to my son, the centre backs are better kickers of the ball than he is. So if we're going to play it long, why don't they play it long rather than let him kick it?
Oh, that's one of my bugbears, and it's not just us that do this, but in lots of football, the very fact that these people, as you say, lack are outfield players, and they're passing the ball about, they have a lack of options, and they just pass it to the keeper, knowing he's got the same lack of options that they do, who hoofs out of the park. What is the point?
And he's 20 metres behind.
Correct.
But if he was any good at playing long balls, he wouldn't be playing in goal.
This is a bit of a tangent, but I thought something that I found quite interesting last night in particular, that was that O'Connell, clearly either just the way that he's been brought through in the academy or just his nature, was getting incredibly frustrated with Gordon and Lustig for playing long balls when they could have kept the ball, and that I think that's something that and I noticed I've spotted this with a lot of the guys that have come through the academy, that there's clearly certain things that they're being taught, and they're all very willing to get on the ball. McGregor's the same. He won't rush. He's happy to take it under pressure and make a pass. O'Connell's very much the same, and I saw the same thing with McCart, who played in the friendlies. And very much the same thing, which, well, a total tangent, is quite a good thing, I think, when we're talking about the guys coming through the academy.
Absolutely. In fact, getting back to Brendan Rodgers' comment last night about the fans, obviously I remember Martin O'Neill having the same type of subtle dig. When you've come with the gravitas, you have the ability, you've got the licence to have a go at the fans and not get their backs up. And there was a point last night when O'Connell had the ball under pressure, turned the guy then, turned and that resulted in the guy going the wrong way and then playing a pass. And the biggest threat probably would have been the collective cries from the Celtic support making him nervous to make the wrong pass. Because he patently felt under control in the situation. It was our lack of confidence and belief in the players that was part of the problem.
Absolutely. I thought O'Connell looked so composed and confident in what was comfortably, he's never played in a game like that before, never played in front of a crowd like that in an important game, and I thought he was excellent. I was sitting with my dad last night and he said to me, if Kolo Toure had played like that from the start, we'd be saying, Kolo's had been an absolutely excellent signing. And I thought that was a good point, that he was just in every aspect last night. I thought he was excellent.
Well, it's one of these things again, getting back to the odd thing about supporters. They want a manager who's going to come in. Everybody believes that the team last season could have performed. Well, not everybody. Lots of people were commenting the team last season would perform 10 to 15% better if we had a different manager. And there are good quality there are good players at our club not getting developed. Brendan Rodgers comes in, guys round about me, well, no wonder this team's rubbish, because it's the same team who was rubbish under Ronnie Deila, and the manager's not going to change any of that. So I do find sometimes supporters funny. But so that's our bottom five: Roberts, McGregor, Gordon, Lustig, Beaton, Johansson. For me, at this point, a couple of notable players not listed yet. The captain and the £1 million striker that we signed in Ciftci. So I'll leave that and we'll maybe revisit it. I'll go to the next two. In fourth place was Rogic. In third place, Sviatchenko. So Mark, do you want to kick us off on those two?
Yeah, well, I had it the other way round, in fact. So pretty close. Rogic, I have a fondness for him as a player. I really like the way he receives the ball on the half turn and moves with the ball. I like how you can keep the ball in when there's a limited space and there's the opposition are kind of closing him down, pressing, whatever, and he retains the ball. He kind of manipulates it with his foot, and he can just do lovely little layoffs to other players. I almost feel like saying, I don't know if this would make a difference, but if the club contracted an athletic coach for two things, when he turns a midfielder, say a defensive midfielder, and he has that little gap of space to go into, I almost want an athletics coach to be able to give him that burst, that little burst over say 2-3 metres to get away from that midfielder, which I'm not sure if he's ever going to have. And if he's not going to have that, then I wonder if he's going to be firstly, if he's going to properly make it, and secondly, if he'll have to go back a little bit into almost the beat-on position, because you really need to be able to, after you make that space for yourself, you need to be able to take advantage of the space you've created and start committing at one of the centre backs or something. The other more obvious thing is that he needs to be able to last 90 minutes. There needs to be a way of increasing his stamina, having him play 6, 7, 8 games in a row where he's getting full games, which I doubt he's done yet. That said, I think, as we were talking about before, when we're kind of judging players on their whole season and it being relative, Rogic had the same amount of minutes as Johansson. He played. Deila deemed both of them to be almost, I think they're 3 minutes apart. So Deila deemed them to be, worthy of the same amount of game time. Johansson was the player of the season before, and Rogic was getting on the bench if he's lucky. And I think last season Rogic scored, I'll just bring this up, Rogic scored 8 goals and made 7. And that's in the same, and that's in what? About the equivalent of 20 full games.
How did that compare with Johansson?
Johansson scored 1 goal, so 1 to 8, and Johansson assisted on 4 to Rogic's 7.
What's interesting, I bet you if you anecdotally went and spoke to supporters and said, getting back to the Jack's point, of part of Johansson's problem was he was perceived as Ronnie's pet, so the criticism of Ronnie passed on to Johansson. I think if you went and spoke to a lot of supporters and said, who played more, Johansson or Rogic, and they would say, anecdotally, they would probably just turn around and say, that was the problem. Rogic played half the amount of games, half the amount of time that Johansson played.
Yeah.
It's interesting because when he came back, before he'd actually got into the team, Deila described him as a brilliant player. Now, I hadn't heard him describe any other players as brilliant players. So he obviously saw something in Rogic that he fancied. But I thought the problem with Rogic, and I think when he's good, he's very good, is that it's episodic. He doesn't. If you're watching Johansson, whether he's playing well or whether he's not playing well, he's always involved in the game. He tries to be involved. He hunts people down. He's not afraid to take the ball, even if he's going to mispass it. But Rogic comes in and out of the game. And your point about him never playing well in the whole games, whereas he's a very good impact sub, is valid. And Matt's point about that wee bit of lack of pace is very valid. And that's what might stop him being the player he could be. And
that's your point there, which is the point I keep going on about being an impact sub. I think the drifting in and out you've mentioned is because he would play 2 or 3 games in a row as a sub, make an impact. Everybody would clamour for, and patently the manager would see the need for it as well, for him to start. And that's when he'd be anonymous and get so that then your point, Lackey, about him drifting in and out. That's where I see it. And I think you're spot on, Mark, about I look at him now. I remember when we got him because he won that
tournament.
In Australia, and by all accounts, when he turned up at training, Neil Lennon, the coaches, thought he was fantastic. And your point, Lackey, about Ronnie Deila saying he was a great player. Maybe for me, it's the thing that stops him being a player that will be successful at Celtic is his lack of pace.
If I recall, I watched the film that was made about him when he was at the Nike thing, and he impressed Manchester City. That Nike team played a tour, played different clubs, and they impressed Manchester City. And then Celtic played them, and they always were impressed by him too. And he had the same problem that Beaton had with Manchester City. They couldn't get a work permit. But Celtic were able to get a work permit, and they signed them. So it's not just Celtic who thought he was a good player.
Jack, your thoughts on Rogic?
I think, and Mark mentioned there the contribution he made in terms of goals and assists. And if you look at from last season, if you look at goals and assists, like per 90 minutes, or basically just adjusted for the time that they played, he was actually the 4th most productive player in the league. There's only Griffiths, Cummins from St Johnstone, and Hemmings were, combined goals and assists, if you take out penalties, was higher. So he's clearly an effective contributor when you think of attacking, but I think the problem with Rogic is something similar to the problem with Commons, which is that he will be very effective in the league, particularly at home. He will score goals, he'll create, but there is a real lack when it comes to European games and someone playing in a midfield role. There's a real lack of a defensive side to his game, and without that, it's especially when you're at a team of Celtic's level, it's very hard to carry a player. defensively in European games.
Well, isn't that that's why Moravcik played one game in the Champions League under Martin O'Neill?
It was brilliant.
But it was from the aspect of the difficulty of when we are playing people who are all, or teams who are all better than us, having a what some would term a luxury player who doesn't do one part of the game, which is defending, when modern football midfielders are expected to be attackers and defenders, and all players are, but particularly midfield.
Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, I think when you look at, we're talking about that sort of defensive contribution, that I'd spoken to a few people, and I'd been looking at sort of a lot of statistics about our games in Europe, and not only just teams but individuals. And Johansson, who kind of played in that number 10 role, which that's Rogic's, that's his only position really in Daila's 4-2-3-1. Mm-hmm. The thing that stood out about Johansson's performance was he recovered the ball significantly more than almost any player in our team, despite playing so high up in the pitch, and that was by far the most impressive aspect of his game. So it seems quite clear that's a big factor, that Johansson being so strong defensively in that role is a big factor as to why Deila would pick him, and I can only agree and understand with that logic.
The Celtic data guys and the management will be looking at, as Jack says, players who have good recoveries of the ball, interceptions, also the amount of sprints people can make a game and the amount of distance they're covering a game. So, for instance, when Mulgrew was playing alongside Brown as a defensive midfielder, he was generally outrunning every opponent that we played when we were playing Milan, Barcelona. Who else was in that group? Ajax. And he was outrunning them. And people were kind of saying, oh, how come Mulgrew's in the team? Well, because, as Jack says, the level that we're going to be at just now, and if we qualify for a Champions League, we are going to need to close down spaces. We're going to need to be able to recover the ball. So they'll be looking at, say, if he's playing that midfield three, they're going to be surely looking at, it's kind of almost depressing as it sounds, they're going to be looking at statistics to say, we're going to need to have players who can run, say, 14, 15 kilometres a game. Mm-hmm. If not, Messi's going to have the ball, in space, because Rogic can't get to him, whereas Johansson, probably will at some point. It's fairly depressing, but
pragmatically. I was going to say there's no point.
Yeah.
You got to be pragmatic and work with what you've got, and
it's depressing in the fact that Rogic is such a talented player on the ball, and if he could just add, and if Celtic could just add that to his game and develop him, then we have a proper player in our hands.
I saw something the other night at Capitol. There was a guy criticising Christopher Ayer because he misplaced the ball several times during that game. But his head never went down. He never stopped demanding the ball, and he never stopped telling other people what to do. Whereas I get the impression with Rogic, if he's not on, the head goes down and he gets dispirited. Whereas it seemed to me, okay, there was only a small crowd. How Ayer might perform in front of a big crowd who get annoyed when you misplace the ball, it remains to be seen. But he himself was full of confidence that, okay, I made a bad pass. Give me the ball. I'll make the next pass. Do you know what I mean? There was an inner confidence about that boy that you don't necessarily see in Rogic for all his real talent.
And, isn't the history of Scottish football in particular littered with, but all football, littered with people that people talk about have got great talent, but They just don't have the physical attributes to be at the very top. So Matt Le Tissier at Southampton, Chick Charnley at Partick Thistle, Andy Ritchie, who was at us and then went to Morton. People who... No, but the point I'm making is people who, on their day, people on that player's day, people would talk about he could do wonderful things with the ball, and on his day could tear a team apart. Andy Ritchie scoring from a corner kick and that type of thing. But the problem was they neither had the dedication or to their fitness levels and training levels, or they just didn't have the fitness to be performing at the top level. And that's why Matt Le Tissier was only ever at Southampton and played rarely for England, and Andy Ritchie left Celtic and became a star at Morton but was never going to be at Celtic, isn't? And maybe Rodgers that same?
Although, as Jack said, at SPL level, Rodgers could then say, OK, but I've contributed the fourth amount of any player in the SPL last season.
And didn't play half the season.
As you said, Mark, if you added up his minutes, it equated to 20 games.
Because we were on a podcast one night and I told you that Roderick was back, and you said, Roderick, I'd forgotten all about him. But we were well into the season when they came back from Australia.
So,
that contribution.
The player in third place, talking about people's defensive abilities and capabilities, was Sviatchenko. Another interesting one for me, based on the fact that he came on as a substitution for Simonovic in the cup in the League Cup. So again, someone only played from February onwards. Jack, what were your thoughts on Sviatchenko?
I think a lot of what we had, why Sviatchenko is so high, was that for the first half of last season, the theme was we do quite well in Europe, but ultimately some defender somewhere makes a mistake and we don't win the game, which goes for Efe against Fenerbahce. Boyata had the same thing a few times. Blackett at home to Molde got the same sort of treatment. And I think Sviatchenko came in, and without looking absolutely like a superstar, he was so solid, just a good defender. He wouldn't take risks, and he's exactly what fits the Celtic support's profile of this is a good defender.
Mark, I can see you smiling there at that comment about this is a good defender.
Well, no, it's just a word, profile there.
Yeah.
That reminds me, I think the last time I was on a podcast with you was maybe around the time, a week or so after Sviatchenko signed. And I think at the time we both said, this is a good profile of a signing. That he's a Danish international, he's about 24. He was captain of his previous club who'd won the league. Cost £2 million. This seems like a good profile of a signing without even seeing him yet.
Yep.
And the good thing about him was that he had it's almost, in some ways it's kind of like Toure. They're not dissimilar players in a way. Toure's a little bit better on the ball and he's quicker. And he was at a much higher level.
Yeah.
But they're both about 6'1".
Mm-hmm.
They're both pretty good organisers. They communicate very well. It's interesting. I think it was 2 weeks ago, Mjällby was on TV talking about Ambrose, and he was saying that he doesn't communicate very well, despite being a good player.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have two players who are very good communicators. There's one thing, just to digress away from Sviatchenko, there's one thing good about Toure last night and surprised about was there's one time when he raced with, I think, the Ghanaian striker.
Yep.
And he won. And it was a good 30-metre run, wasn't it?
Yep.
And I was surprised because he's 35 now or something.
Mm-hmm.
I was surprised he still had that pace. So that's a good sign. Back to Sviatchenko, good organiser, good defender. I'd be surprised, to be honest, if we could sell him on for, like the kind of fees that we've been getting for our best players. Yep. But I think it's a good quality signing.
Lackey, you had Sviatchenko a bit further down your voting.
Well, I thought, he hadn't been there that long. And I think a lot of what people saw in him was as much his personality as his performances today. When he came in, I don't think he was fully fit, but he showed promise. He looked to me to be a sensible defender. A guy who wouldn't take unnecessary risks. And I think he held out the hopes that we brought a solid player. And that's what they need. The number of times I've said, just give us solidity at the back so that you don't anticipate a disaster. I found last night a really stressful experience, possibly the most stressful I've ever been at any game, because I knew how high the stakes were. And I could see them playing, and I kept thinking, someone will make a mistake. Now, I know mistakes happen in many teams. There are some teams where a mistake is unusual, whereas with us, it's the norm. And I keep hoping they'll sign centre-backs who will build a wall.
And get the Mexicans to pay for it. So we've got our voting so far is Sviatchenko in third, Rogic fourth, Roberts fifth, McGregor sixth, Gordon seventh, Lustig eighth, Beaton ninth, Johansson 10th. So I think it's fairly obvious who the top two are. There's some people who only voted for these two, and I'm not going to say what order they were in yet. And that's I'll do it in position order of starting at the back. So Tierney, and then up to Griffiths up front with the two players. So I just want to ask everybody's opinion on some players who played a decent amount of games and weren't rated. Well, not some players who played, some players whose names were high profile and weren't in this top 10. So Mackay-Steven, who, like McGregor, came in and scored goals and was in our top 10 last season. Armstrong, who was in our top 10 last season. Brown, the club captain. Ciftci, and Scott Allan. There's 5 players. Jack, why do you think those 5 were not in the top? Or comment on your thoughts about the fact that those 5 weren't in the top 10.
I think, starting from the easiest first, a part of me, knowing the Celtic support like I do, is quite surprised that Scott Allan never made it into the top 10. because people seem to have turned him into Riquelme or something, and every week that he didn't play, he became magically an even better player than the week before. Brown, again, I think the same thing as I've already said for quite a few of the players was I felt that Brown was, the first season under Deila was arguably Brown's best season I've seen. He was quite consistently in the team, and when he was in the team he was good, and him and Beaton had a really good partnership. But again, the same thing last year, the injuries seemed to catch up with him again, and it just wasn't as good as the year before. Ciftci, again, that's a simple case of he just wasn't in the team. Who, on a slight tangent, has looked surprisingly good this pre-season. I thought he seemed quicker and more technically able. I don't know if that's just a total mistake on my part, or if it's just he's sharper. Who else did you? Mackay-Steven, I think, was actually an unusual one, because like you guys had mentioned, he scored and he also created, but there was a thing about there's definitely an idea that Mackay-Steven is one of the players in the squad who doesn't have the heart to play for Celtic, and I'm never quite sure what that means. but
So we're missing St Anthony on. That's one of St Anthony's favourite attributes for a footballer, that he has heart. I don't know what it means either. We'll get him on one day and ask him to explain it.
that would be helpful. And to be fair to St Anthony, I think he takes a lot of stick on this podcast for a few things, but in so many ways he's just exactly the same as 95% of the people that I speak to about football. But yeah, getting back to Mackay, Stephen, it was an odd one, and I feel like I'm just making the same points over and over again, but he was so good in the second half of last season that the expectations were just so high, and I think that maybe just as an overall theme for the season was that Deila's second season didn't live up to what we thought we were going to get after his first season.
So, Mark, your comments on the five who are missing?
It's quite funny in a way that Mackay, Stephen and Armstrong, as you say, were in the top 10 last season, despite only coming at the end of January. And they've had a full season now, and I think everyone's pretty much agreed that they both had poor seasons last season. For me, Armstrong's a kind of strange player, especially for that kind of system that we were playing last season, because he isn't intricate enough to be a kind of one of the players in a high left position. He's a box to box player. He has good energy, but I don't think he's good enough on the ball to start kind of like pulling the defence in and out of position, creating spaces with his passing that you'd want a number 10 to be. He's almost like in a 4-4-2. If you have a sitting midfielder, he would be the box-to-box guy who would kind of get into the box with a late run and have a half-decent shot, and he'd have a lot of energy. But I don't see how he can really fit. He's not really going to be defensive, and he's not intricate enough to be further up the pitch.
Last night I thought, somebody sent me a text, which just after that text he did something which summed up their point. I thought he was doing all right. Well, it's not outstanding, he was doing all right. And then when we made the substitution and he had to go out wide, that's when Armstrong started to not be performing so well. And somebody said to me, as soon as Armstrong's gone out wide, he's played worse. And straight after that, the ball broke to Armstrong. It was in the second half. Ball broke to Armstrong in edge of the box, and he got dispossessed because it was almost as if now that he was out wide, he didn't think anybody could come from behind him, and he thought he had all the time in the world. And the guy came in and took the ball away. So I just don't think he's going to make it. I think he's one of the 10 or 12 players that Brendan's although I was going to say he's one of the 10 or 12 players that Brendan has identified will not be part of our squad in the long term, but he's getting more game time than people that I thought he might be keeping. Lackey, your thoughts on those 5 players?
Well, I was disappointed that they didn't give Scott Allan more time, because I thought he was one of the few players that could see a forward pass. And I saw comments today that it was his lack of industry. The managers, both managers, neither were impressed by his work rate off the ball. But in terms of technical ability, I thought he was one of the better players.
I think I made the point in the last podcast with Alan. I thought it was interesting that Rogers said virtually the same thing as Ronnie Deila. Remember Ronnie Deila? And this would be, by the way, just to let you know, one person gave a vote to Scott Allan.
I saw him playing for the Hibs down here against Queen of the South, and I came away from the game thinking the best man in the park was Dylan McGeoch. But the Queen of the South friends were raving about Scott Allan, and I thought maybe my pro-Celtic bias had led me towards watching Dylan McGeoch rather than watching Scott Allan. But I did think when he came to Celtic that he did have something to offer. And curiously, I thought that game last week against Wolfsburg was the best I'd seen him play. I thought when he came on in the second half that afternoon, he had some brilliant passes and really good forward runs with the ball, and I thought that's the player we're looking for. Next thing he's away out the door.
Well, the interesting thing about, just as an aside, and it's about you and I disagreeing on that, because I think we met up after that Wolfsburg game, and the 3 or 4 players that I said, having watched that game, these players are definitely on the way out, and I think I mentioned 3 or 4 players that you said you thought they'd been our best 3 or 4 players. But I thought there was a point last night to me that summed up difference of opinion of football fans, but also summed up how football managers can not win. There was a bit where Brown played the ball to Yanko, and Yanko had a guy close to him, was quickly closed down, and managed to play the ball away. But it was close. And as he did that, the guys behind me said, "Tell you what, who's having a good game today? Scott Brown. He's playing really well today." At exactly the same moment, the guy in front of me was shouting, "Brown, you useless so-and-so, another hospital pass from you." And I thought, you can't win at exactly the same moment, 2 people having completely opposite opinions of the same player. So, obviously everybody...
As far as Armstrong goes, I had great hopes for Armstrong. I thought he was a very modern footballer, if you know what I mean. But last night, I thought, especially after half-time, he completely lost his way. And I thought he looked afraid. He didn't want the ball. And when he did get it, he didn't know what to do with it. And I was straight. He sent Ciftci up to warm up. And I assumed he was going to take Armstrong off and bring Ciftci on to play on that left side. But then we had that bizarre non-goal that they got that was disallowed. And he immediately brought on Colature, as if his concern had shifted from a lack of creativity on the left-hand side of the pitch to a concern about the back.
Who I thought calmed everything down when he came on, Toure.
He did. I'm not criticising in the long term that Toure played superbly, but I thought the priority at that point in time was to get Armstrong off the park because he really looked scared.
So
I definitely talked about what Ronnie said about some players not being able to deal with a crowd hostility.
Yeah.
I thought that showed in spades last night with Armstrong.
Mark, you were going to make a point?
I was just going to actually repeat myself, but not a first.
Why not? We do that in the podcast every second.
Yeah.
I just basically repeat my performances on a podcast from the time before I said this. Anyway,
that's why we need to sign players, otherwise our podcast become boring because we're just saying the same thing about the same players.
It's true. I just don't think he's good enough when there's a limited amount of space. When there's reduced space, I don't think he has. It's kind of the movement of his feet. It's not intricate enough. Like he doesn't. The defender kind of, I think, can suss out that he doesn't have anything to be able to really go past him to take him on. Mm. And then I think, well, then where are you going to put him? Like, it's a serious question, Lackey. Like, where would you play Armstrong?
Well, I thought I would have played him in the central midfield, but now I'm beginning to have doubts because I don't know if he's strong enough mentally
Jack,
to take Joe on.
Where would you play him?
I'm consistently. I mean, my opinion of Armstrong seems to change all the time. I was so impressed when he came in, and sometimes he has a run and you think, yeah, he looks quite good. But I think the best I've seen him, and maybe this is almost contradicting what Mark said, but I think playing on the left, especially when we started playing the 4-4-2/3-5-2, and he was playing on the left defensively, where he's not the strongest defensively, but as a wide midfielder, decent enough, but he was then being able to drift inside into a more central position higher up the pitch, which suited him. But it's hard to place him. I think Mark's point about not having quick enough feet is spot on, and I think that's something that especially becomes an issue in the middle of the park when it's tough. Like, same with the way that Astana played, their whole defensive game plan was around stopping us playing through the middle of the pitch. So you have to be, if we're going to be able to do that, then you have to be very good technically, and Armstrong isn't really.
Touching on, obviously this is a review of players from last season, but touching on last night, Jack, I thought it was very unusual that a team who needed to score a goal or they were out played with a flat back five.
Yeah, I mean, I think when, and I've spoke about this, I wrote about it today, and I've tweeted about it as well, that the system that they played was perfect to play against our back three, come back four system, but when we used the 4-5-1, it messed their shape up, because they had, when it was Forrest and Roberts to start off with, and then Forrest and Armstrong, and they were playing so high up that, like you said, those guys, it became a flat back five. And I thought, and again, like we're digressing a bit, but I think as much as there was other reasons for the substitution that he made, that going back to the three at the back last night was a mistake. Just because the four just suited playing against Astana and their approach so much better. On you go.
Did you notice last night, in the first half, when they had corner kicks, we left 3 men up the pitch, which meant they had to have 4 men back. And I've been arguing for months, and the other night at Capello, I was sitting to talk to another guy, and we were raving about the fact that Celtic brought every player back at corner kicks, so that all our players were inside our own penalty area when the other team had a corner kick. And we were saying, why don't they leave someone up the park to relieve the pressure? And I noticed that the other night in the first half, at one point we had Griffiths, Roberts and James Forrest spread right across the halfway line, and they had to bring so many men back to cover those three that it meant there was less congestion in the area and a better chance of us getting the ball away. So, in terms of the tactics, I think he had been second guessing all the time last night until Roberts went off.
Although I agree with Jack's point about there's a period from when Toure comes on and before Dembele comes on, that kind of 15 to 20 minute periods where we go to that back three, and because they had just scored, they were kind of like, okay, well, we can slightly sit in there a little bit. And so we had Toure was always on the ball in the centre, and then he'd pass it out to Lustig or Connell. Mm-hmm. And they were almost like, well, we have everyone covered here. How are you going to start constructing your attacks? And there was about 10 minutes where we didn't know what to do, to be honest. And it kept on breaking down after about 3 or 4 passes, and then they would get the ball and kind of move up the pitch. I think they got a couple of corners, or they had a couple of kind of a bit of possession near our box. And then he brings on Dembele. But at that period, I thought we were going out, to be honest. I thought in one of these moments they're going to put a ball in the box.
It gets back to the point that Brendan Rodgers made, which is one of the things that frustrates me. I think it's the big issue of being able to read people's stream of consciousness during games on Twitter. When people make comments of why is player X not doing such and such, why is player Y not doing such and such, because that's not his job. But the other thing that was getting me last night is your point, Mark, and Brendan Rodgers touched on it. The one thing that all club football teams can now do in modern football is coach themselves to be very well organised. And our problem for a period last night was our defenders were having the ball with 0 options of where to play it. Because they, as you say, once they'd scored the goal, they seemed to be reasonably happy that they were still in the tie, and we just had no options.
I think the thing with the back three was that when they had through both games, they had absolute control over the middle of the pitch. They used, without even the use of their sort of back five, but the two midfielders, then the kind of attacking midfielder and the front two, just stopped us using the centre of the park at all. We couldn't get the ball in there, and when we did, they closed it down well. But with a 4-5-1, we could use our wingers to pin their wing backs back, and then there was space for Yanko and Tierney to move up. But when we moved to the 3-5-2, it was basically one-on-one between the two teams' wing backs. So either Yanko or Tierney come deep for the ball, and then there's no one else further up the wing to play it to, or they are all there themselves further up the wing, but then there's no one for the centre backs to play it to. It just, I mean, I see why he did it, because clearly, and he made the point before the game that he said, Toure probably won't start, but we've got the option there if we bring him on and we add more height to the team. And we had just looked a bit shaky from a set piece, and Armstrong wasn't playing well. So from that position, it seemed to make sense. But in hindsight, and it's easy to say with hindsight, maybe Yanko would have been a smarter change, and that would have had the effect of making us stronger at set pieces, but also wouldn't have forced us into that change of shape, which I think had a really negative effect on the team and nearly cost us.
I still think he would have had to take Armstrong off because he was struggling. His initial move was to bring on Ciftci, because he definitely sent him out to warm up his own.
Well,
so Armstrong was getting the hook, but the way he did it disrupted the balance of the team.
But we went through, and one of the players that's just been mentioned in that chat is a guy who, for 2 or 3 seasons now, minimum, prior to last season, people were talking about Izagiri. People like him, but people were seeing that there was a better left back was required, and I know that Ronnie Deila in 3 transfer windows have prioritised wanting a left back and hadn't got one and been very upset. So in second place in our top 10 was Kieran Tierney, which means Griffiths was number 1. So, Jack, do you want to talk through your thoughts on Tierney and Griffiths' seasons last season?
I feel bad a lot of the time, because generally I find that my opinions are quite moderate, and so when guys are highly criticised, I tend to think, nah, they're not that bad, and when the guys are highly praised, I tend to think they're not maybe as excellent. I think as they're not as excellent as maybe they're made.
You mean it's not all feast or famine?
No.
Isn't that the nature of being a Celtic fan? Everything's either brilliant or absolutely dreadful.
Of course. I think with regards to Griffiths, he had clearly an excellent season last year, so many goals, but there's a recurrent theme that once we get to a certain level of opposition, he looks like he's struggling. I think he'll always get you a goal against this level of team. He scored twice against Malmo last year, Astana, but any upgrade on that, and he really starts to struggle. And I think long term, Dembele, perhaps we'll see him kick on from last night. Dembele is more of a sustainable option, especially if you're going to be playing one up front in Europe. With regards to Tierney, I wouldn't be negative, because ultimately there might be weak points to his game, but he's just turned 19 years old.
Yeah,
he has got, as you said, Deila said, he can be as good as he wants to be, and for the age he is, he's an absolutely excellent player. I don't think he's as perfect as some Celtic fans do, but he's absolutely an unbelievable talent.
Lackey?
I agree. I think he's an unbelievable talent. It bothers me slightly that in order to give this very fine player a game, that Izagiri had to stay out of the team, because I think Izagiri was a very good player, and I don't think Izagiri merited much of the criticism that he got. So while I'm delighted that they've got a brilliant young left back, I'd still like them to somehow make use of Izagiri. Now, last night, he was on the bench last night, was he? But they could have done with both of them on at one point after they took the wingers off, if you know what I mean. But, I mean, Tierney has got tremendous potential. And I don't really see any weaknesses in his game other than the fact that he's still physically quite undeveloped. I mean, last year there were some games where, although he was playing brilliantly, he was literally blowing hard and taking energy drinks and stuff aboard during the game. But his spirit and his appetite kept him going. But he's as good a left back as I've seen. Well, we never did have good left backs, so he's
getting back to my time when Danny McGrain played left back, because
he's as good a left back as I've seen.
So,
Griffiths, I think Griffiths is not just an opportunist goal scorer. He does a lot of work. He works very hard to try and be the player that we're seeing just now. And I know what you're saying about against Ajax last year. He was through a couple of times and you thought he's going to score and he missed. And last night he had a couple of really good chances. But one of them was a fantastic tackle that stopped him when he got hurt. And the other one, I think he just shot a wee bit rashly. But I think Griffiths has still got a role to play in that team, even if they go further in this competition or if they're in the Europa League, because I think he's actually a very good player.
Mark?
But Tierney's magic.
On Tierney, there's a couple of points that I find it's kind of strange that he's been a converted left back from a left winger apparently, and yet for me that seems to be his strength at the back. Mm-hmm. He's tenacious, he times his tackles well, he's pretty good one-on-one. Now, I thought, I was listening to your podcast with Jack last week, I think it was, or a week before, and I thought Jack's analysis of Tierney's qualities was spot on, that he's very good at the back, he's good when he gets maybe around the box, he has this, something he does really well is he has this drilled cross. It's almost like a fast cutback drilled cross, and there's like a striker or midfielder coming in almost in the near post about 12, 15 yards out, who can often have a pretty good shot from it. But the part in the middle of the pitch, I think he can improve on, and I think he will improve on, because the fullbacks, like attacking fullbacks, obviously get loads of the ball and just kind of linking up the play just as an option on about the halfway line, and they're often got one or two people kind of quite close to them trying to close down options. And on that aspect of the game, Izagiri is probably the best fullback I've seen at Celtic for doing that. For in the Champions League, when midfielders don't have time on the ball and they're looking for an option and they give it to Izagiri, and he retains the ball for Celtic. And I think Tierney is 19, so he has loads of time to improve. I think that's the aspect of the game I'd like to see him improve on. Have him training with people coming towards him in a limited space and trying to find a man. I think he's a very good player. On Griffiths, I suspect there's coaches who are specifically good at coaching strikers, and you see like Simeone. And Simeone gets hold of Diego Costa, who'd had an okay career in Spain but not exceptional. Falcao, who was a good player but not exceptional. And it's happened with Griezmann now. Mm-hmm. And Simeone's elevated these players up to be elite strikers. Now, obviously, they were very good before, and they were at a level above Griffiths is now. Before, yeah. But Rodgers did something similar with Suarez. Suarez was a very good striker before, and he made him into a phenomenon. Sturridge was a good striker before, and he made him like 2 levels above. And I'm hoping that Rodgers can identify parts of Griffiths' game, holding up the ball and linking play when he hasn't got a lot of options on, as we'll need him to do in Europe away if he's going to be playing up front in his own.
I mean, that pass he gave to Dembele last night for the penalty kick was really quite subtle.
Yep. Superb.
He does have ability.
Yep.
I spoke to a former Celtic player about Tierney, and he said he's the best tackler he's seen for years. He says they can sand dance over the ball all they like, he will just take it from them. He's a great tackler, he says. And he doesn't need to dive in. He just reads it very well.
Well, I mean, one of the things that I've talked about on a number of times on this podcast, and it's a bit that's highlighted in the numbers game, is all about the fact that actually as defenders get better, they make fewer and fewer tackles in a game.
Yeah, we know that's not the point I'm making.
No, I'm just saying that
when guys come up to him 1-to-1 and they do all these fancy manoeuvres, he takes the ball from them very cleanly. Doesn't need to dive in. He's a really good tackler from that perspective.
There's one other thing, Lackey, is that last week when he was over in Kazakhstan, it almost impressed me more, his performance last week, when he was pretty poor in the first half, right? That Ghanaian striker was kind of going past him and he was just a little bit off the pace. And how many times have we seen defenders like that just crumble under that pressure? And in the second half, he probably had an 8 out of 10 performance. He barely put a foot wrong.
I know,
and I thought...
I was away in the boat and didn't see any of it. So, I mean, I haven't even seen the goal. So, you need to tell me what happened.
So, we've got our top 10. I don't think there's any surprises that Griffiths and Tierney were in the top 2. Is there any player that you think will be that already you think to yourself he's going to be in our top 10 next season? Jack?
O'Connell.
Do you think O'Connell will start to play first team football regularly?
If O'Connell plays on a week-to-week basis like he played last night, I'll be so interested to see how he fits the three of O'Connell, Toure and Sviatchenko in, because he was I mean, for me, easily the man of the match last night. And especially, I mean, I made the point last night, and I think it was late enough that I didn't get much criticism for this because I was expecting it. But I said, granted, O'Connell has years, maybe a year and a half on Tierney. O'Connell has been more impressive over the last few weeks than Tierney was in his first few games for Celtic in the team last year.
So you think he's going to keep Simonovic, Boyata out of the team?
I would, like I said, if he keeps playing like he is, then I can't see that the manager's got any other choice.
We don't really know how good Simonovic is. But if O'Connell continues to play the way he's played so far, he will keep Boyata out of the team.
Well, have you got a surprise person that you think is going to be in the top 10 next season, Lackey?
Mine would have been O'Connell as well. I think he looks very promising.
Okay, Mark?
I can't really think of a surprise, but I think Dembele will score about 15 to 20 goals this season.
Okay.
So he'll be in.
Well, I was hoping, I was wondering if we would get a chance at a next season preview as well as the top 10, but that's an hour and a half, so that's probably long enough for people to listen to our podcast. That's to and from work, and to and from work for some people. So I will say thanks very much, Lackey, Jack, Mark, and hope everyone enjoyed the chat.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you.
These lost stars who belonged here Street lights only light the way. Last door, middle of the stairs, lost under clear skies and muddied stairs.
Can you believe it? We managed to make the chat about the top 10 players last an hour and a half. Now, granted, a chunk of that was talking about the Astana game and the way that we've started and some of the players have started under Brendan Rodgers. However, intrinsically, that was 90 minutes of chat about one of the more forgettable seasons. And as we talked about in the podcast, many of the players, in terms of minutes in the park, won not more than 20-25 games. So it was quite difficult. We actually, chatting about the podcast, talked about the possibility that it might need to be a top 10 player of the season and preview of next season podcast, because we generally thought we'd rattle through certainly the bottom 8 players. But anyway, managed to talk about the players. Hope you enjoyed that. Hope you're enjoying the new music that we're getting on. If you want your new music, it's podcasts at celticunderground.net. That's podcasts at celticunderground.net. Send those in. SoundCloud, YouTube, whatever, Dropbox, whatever other type of links, get those in. Stories about your game, we've got, that'll be on the next podcast. First story about somebody's Celtic game, that'll be on there. Another thing I quite like to do is, I've moved beyond listening to music when I'm out and about in the car, and it's only podcasts. I just love learning things, getting new information. So more and more I'm starting to listen to lots of different podcasts. So the other thing, if you can email podcasts at celticunderground.net, I'd quite like to start recommending to people podcasts that they should be listening to, other than these and other than just Celtic ones. You know, just generally interesting podcasts. I've just been starting to listening to the Malcolm Gladwell podcasts. He makes recommendations on those podcasts, which led me to others. There's some political podcasts I've been listening to, particularly with the American election coming up. So, from the next podcast, I will start saying some of the ones I listen to that you might find interesting in various categories. If there's some podcasts, if you can make some recommendations that I can start listening to them, and I'll share those with people. Podcasts at celticunderground.net. Don't forget the stuff of the foundation are doing. You can raise money whichever way you want. Go to the Celtic FC Foundation website and you can see what you can do. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the top 10 podcast. So before we move on to the podcast series of the 11th season of the world's longest running football fans podcast, I know, James, you really like it when I use that phrase. I better run through the top 10 to refresh your memory in reverse order. Johansson, Beaton, Lustig, Gordon, McGregor, Roberts, Rogic, Sviatchenko, Tierney and Griffiths. And thanks to everybody who had a vote on it. I can't go through everybody's names, but very quickly running through, we had Sean Hamilton, Dylan James, Angus Gibson, Sean McConaughey, Bernard Williams, Johnny Muldoon, Andrew Higgins, Stephen McNaughton, Robert Johnson, David Andrew Flanagan, Robert Sherry, Paul McMullen, Doug Campbell, Liam Hamilton, Jack, Callum, Alan McCusker, and others whose names I don't have. Thanks for submitting your votes. There was the usual Celtic Underground team, including myself, including Jack Lyons, Lackey Moore, Mark Cooper, St Anthony, whose apologies passes on. However, one man who was supposed to be in the podcast, who didn't get his finger out and get the vote in, was Hallboy. But enough of me. This is me, Harry Brady, saying good night and God bless. Good night.
Sleep then awake, sleep then awake, sleep then awake. I cannot go on, You give me my own bed. 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 You give